Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us on this blessed, auspicious occasion wherein we celebrate the holy appearance of Sri Balaram. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells, Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam eti sorujana. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yovita tattvata tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam eti sorujana. That one who hears and understands the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities never takes birth in this material world again, but attains to my supreme abode. When Krishna comes to this world in his many incarnations, and when he peers through the hearts of those pure devotees who serve him with love, he establishes forever his presence in the hearts of the devotees. Through transcendental sound vibration, we can directly, personally, be in the association of the Lord. That is his will. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate. The Supreme Lord is the source of all material and all spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from him. When we see the inconceivable potencies that are manifest within this tiny little universe of ours, we can get just a fraction of a little hint of the greatness of God. How is the sun burning for so long in its size, staying in its place, with all the planets, the galaxies, and the perfection of how everything is so well coordinated within this tiny little creation of material energy. So Krishna has a Chinta Shakti, he has inconceivable potency. And the whole purpose of material existence is explained by Krishna himself. It is to give people the opportunity to utilize their free will to come once again in harmony with their true nature. The nature of the soul, the Atma, the living force within everyone is we are eternal. We are Vibhinamsha. We are eternally part of Krishna, of the Supreme Truth. The body is a temporary dress. The whole material existence are different facilities to give opportunities for the eternal soul to either elevate or misuse our free will. So the purpose of this material existence is to understand that. Janma mrityu jara vyadi dukkha dosanu darshanam. Whoever we are, whatever we do, whatever we accomplish, still we have to grow old, get diseased, and death is inevitable for everyone. For ourselves, for our loved ones, and the destruction of everything around us that we spend so much time to achieve will come to pass. Everything is temporary. How can the eternal soul be happy trying to enjoy temporary arrangements with temporary things? And it's all hollow and shallow. Because the Nitya Dharma, the supreme Dharma for the soul, is to live according to the nature of our eternal self. And that is to live expressing our natural love at every moment in our life and for all of eternity. And the origin of that love is Krishna, Bhagavan's love for us, and our natural love for him. And for all people, all living beings, and all energies connected to him. That is Sanatana Dharma, true yoga, true religion. It's the purpose of life. And the Lord descends into this world to give us opportunity to achieve that perfection of life. Krishna is a big Yaswarat. He's all-knowing, and he has complete independence to do anything. And being infinitesimal parts and parcels of Krishna, we also have free will. Jivera Swarupai Krishnara Nityadas. When we just accept our true natures, we're eternally servants of Krishna. Because to love means to serve. To the extent we awaken the love for Krishna that is within us, we become inspired, enthusiastic, and determined, samsiddhir haritoshanam, to please Krishna, to serve Krishna. Patram pushpam palam toyam. All it takes is our love to please Krishna. Whether we offer a leaf of fruit, a flower, or some water with devotion, Krishna's pleased. When Krishna's pleased, he bestows his grace upon us, and by that grace, we are freed from the coverings of illusion. So Krishna has inconceivable powers, and they're all based on his limitless compassion, mercy, and love. So Krishna descends within the transcendental sound vibration of his glories and his names. When we hear his activities with faith from those who truly, through Guru Parampara, are living in harmony with Krishna's will, through those who are truly aspiring to love and serve Krishna, when we hear from such people, and when we chant Krishna's name under their direction, then Krishna manifests himself and purifies our hearts. So let us speak something about the appearance of Lord Balaram. What can we say? It is told to us that an expansion of Balaram is Ananta, which means unlimited, forever. Ananta Shesha, he has thousands of mouths. And with his thousands of mouths, he's constantly chanting the glories of Lord Krishna. And even for the whole cosmic manifestation, that duration, he cannot speak what Krishna does in one moment, fully. So Krishna's glories are limitless. And Balaram, the first expansion, who is none different than Krishna, who is Krishna, as the Supreme Personality of Servitor Godhead. How can we speak in the next hour and 20 minutes with one little tiny useless mouth? What is adequate? But Krishna is so merciful. Even with our little, what is our mouth compared to Ananta Shesha? But if we even just simply try to speak Balaram's glories with sincerity, and equally as much if we just try to hear his glories, even from a tiny little mouth, with sincerity, because we are repeating and hearing what is being repeated from the gurus, the sadhus, and the shastras, we can attain the ultimate perfection by Balaram's grace. 8 days from today is Janmashtami, Krishna's appearance. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Harivamsa, and the realizations of the great acharyas, we learn something of the story. We'll begin with Devaki and Vasudeva. Vasudeva, the son of Surasena. Sister is Kunti. Kunti had a sister who was the mother of Shishupal. Another sister who was mother of Dantavakra. So it's quite a mixed family. Unity and diversity. And the cousin brother of Devaki is Kamsa. And on the day of their marriage, Kamsa hears a voice, a mysterious voice. The 8th child of your sister will kill you, Kamsa. So Kamsa, he was about to sever the head of Devaki. Vasudeva somehow or other convinced him, I promise I'll give you all my children. So in due course of time, Kamsa put Devaki and Vasudeva in prison. Terrible prison. They were shackled with chains. Guards, cruel guards with weapons, constantly guarding every movement they made. And each time a child was born, Kamsa would come down right before Devaki's eyes and dash the child against a rock to death. But still, Devaki and Vasudeva, in their previous life, Sutapa and Prishni, they performed long tapasya to get the Supreme Personality of Godhead as their child. So they had this inherent desire. And the Paramatma in their heart was keeping that desire very much alive. Kamsa was so cruel. So many members of the Yadu dynasty, Andaka dynasty, Bhoja dynasty, seeing his atrocities, he wasn't only persecuting Vasudeva and Devaki and killing the children, but he was usurping everything. He wanted total power. He was cruel. So many of his own relatives within his kingdom, they fled to other kingdoms, trying to find shelter somewhere. But some people stayed, even pious, good people like Akrura. Why did he stay? And in order to stay, you had to cooperate with Kamsa. It wasn't a democracy. He had to, what Kamsa was saying he had to do. He had to say nice things about Kamsa. He was willing to do that, and others too, because they knew that Lord Vishnu was going to appear. And they wanted to see that. They wanted to be there for the Lord when he came. So our acharyas tell us from the Haribamsa that Marichi represents the mind. And there's 6 sons of the mind. Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita the 6 senses which include the mind. When you control the mind, you can control all the other senses. If you cannot control the mind, you cannot. Krishna tells that the mind, when it is engaged in the service of the Lord, when it's controlled, it's our best friend. But when it's not harmonized in the service of the Lord, when it's uncontrolled, it's our only enemy. So Marichi, a great sage, he represents the mind, and he had these 6 sons. They represent the enemies within us of lust. That means pursuant of selfish gratifications. When it's unfulfilled, anger. However much we get, we want more. Greed for ourselves. Arrogance. We have this insidious need to feel ourselves superior to others. And when somebody does better, envy. Illusion. Constantly bewildered of who we are or what we truly need. Lust, anger, envy, arrogance, greed, illusion. They are represented by these 6 sons of Devaki. And Kamsa represents fear of material existence. Devaki represents bhakti. By the influence of Devaki seeing the imminent dangers that Kamsa was bringing her, she was taking shelter of Krishna. And gradually, all the 6 enemies were killed. Then what happened? Then Krishna himself, in the form of Shesha, his first expansion, the original Guru, entered into the womb of Devaki. How could we even imagine what Devaki felt like when Balaram entered into her womb? It's not like a regular mother where there's just a little seed and you don't know what's going on. Balaram is Balaram. He's the supreme absolute truth. He's the supreme personality of Godhead with all of his opulences and all of his potencies in full is within her womb. And what was his purpose of coming into the womb of Devaki? Because Balaram is considered to be the supreme personality of servitor Godhead. He's God whose only will is to serve God. Love. He came to prepare the womb to be a suitable place for Krishna to come. So Devaki was in ecstasy. At the same time, she was in agony. She was in ecstasy because she felt the presence of the all-attractive, all-loving God within her. But she was in agony because she understood as soon as he's born, Kamsa is going to kill him. So it was at that time that Krishna personally called for his internal potency of Yoga Maya and gave an instruction. He said, my original expansion, Shesha Baladev, is now within the womb of Devaki to make wonderful arrangements for my coming into her womb. But his eternal mother is Rohini, who was a wife of Vasudeva. When her husband was put in prison, she went to Gokul, Mahaban, to take shelter of Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mai and the Brijbasis. Krishna told Yogamaya, transfer me from Devaki's womb to Rohini, Balaram's eternal mother's womb. And then I will personally enter into Devaki's womb, and you enter into Yashoda and be born as her daughter. Yogamaya, she said, Om. Om means yes, in this sense. It means I surrender to your will, my Lord. So when we say Om, we should understand. From a Vaishnava bhakti perspective, Om is an invocation of Krishna, Pranava Sarva Vedeshu. Krishna says, I am the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. It's Krishna's name. Krishna's present in that divine sound vibration. And when we begin our invocations with Om, we are invoking Krishna's presence through our surrender. Just at that time, Rohini, who was in Gokul, she was 7 months pregnant from Vasudeva. Divine arrangement. And at midnight, she had what the Haribamsa says was as if a dream. That means it was a divine vision. She had this dream that she had a miscarriage. She was so startled, she woke up. Upon awakening, she understood she did have a miscarriage. This is something terribly traumatic for a mother. She was in great anxiety. Yogamaya then spoke to her and told her that on the order of the Supreme Lord, I am replacing your child with the child that is being transferred from the womb of Devaki. You are his eternal mother. And because your child will give great happiness to all of Gokul, his name will be Ram. Because he will perform great, great feats of strength, his name will be Balabhadra. And it so happened. Meanwhile, back in Mathura, it appeared that Devaki had a miscarriage. So Kamsa, what could he do? He just accepted it. Little did he know and today. 8 days before the appearance of Lord Sri Krishna in Gokul Mahavan and Mathura, Sri Balaram was born. Rohini Nandan. And Krishna appeared. But we'll discuss that story 8 days from now. Who is Balaram? He's Krishna's own body. The only difference between Krishna and Balaram is just the particular form of their bodies. Krishna has a complexion that's dark like a monsoon cloud, Balaram like a white like a spring cloud. But they are both of the same Swamsa. They are both the supreme absolute truth who are filled with all 6 opulences. But Balaram, everything he does is to facilitate the pleasure of Krishna and Krishna's loving relationships with his devotees. We learn bhakti, we learn devotion from Balaram. He's the original guru. He helps us to understand how to remove all obstacles in the path of devotion, not only by the teachings that he gives us through the gurus, through the scriptures, but by his own incredible example. He wants nothing for himself. Everything's for Krishna. And how does he show his enthusiasm to please Krishna? He expands. In the spiritual world, Balaram expands himself as Vaikuntha, as Goloka. The spiritual world is a manifestation of him, of his service attitude. And then in every small detailed way, because love is not only in the big things, it's in the small things too. What is bhakti? Not only does he manifest the spiritual world with all of its variegatedness, but he personally becomes Krishna's umbrella, his bed, his seat, his shoes, slippers, Krishna's jewelry, Krishna's clothes. They're all actually the expansion of the body and the love of Sri Balaramji in Shantaras. And he's always engaged in serving Krishna in every possible way. As Sakyaras, he gives Krishna pleasure by being his friend. They play. They talk. They joke. They laugh. They share prasad. They do everything together. Krishna and Balaram are inseparable brothers and friends. In Vatsalya Ras, Balaram's elder brother. So he also has parental affection to protect Krishna, to guide Krishna. And in Madhurya Ras, or conjugal love, Balaram personally expands himself as Ananga Manjari, Sri Radha's younger sister, to be there, to facilitate, to serve in every possible way the most confidential, intimate, loving relationships of pure, ecstatic devotion between Radha and Krishna. That's the spiritual world. Some indications of Balaram's seva. And when it comes to material existence, Krishna manifests himself as Baladev, and then Baladev manifests as Shankarsham, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Vasudev, Narayan is a manifestation of Balaram, an expansion. Then the second quadruple expansions. This is in the spiritual realm. And for material creation, an expansion of an expansion of expansion of Balaram himself becomes Mahavishnu, the super soul of the entire cosmic manifestation. All the universes emanate from the pores of his body when he exhales, and they all are withdrawn within him on a simple momentary inhalation. That is Balaram's expansion. He's laying in the causal ocean. Beyond this material existence is the Paravyoma, the spiritual sky. Within the spiritual sky are limitless spiritual planets called Vaikunthas. And just outside the Paravyoma, the spiritual sky, is the causal ocean, the Karana. Mahavishnu is laying there. He expands himself within each universe as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, from whom Brahma is born. And Garbhodakshaya Vishnu expands as Kshirodakshaya Vishnu to live in the heart of every living being, to be present within every atom in the whole universal creation. This is how Balaram is serving. So if we're proud about what we're doing, just think about who we are and who is Balaram. How great, how powerful. Yet his only will is to give pleasure to Krishna. And he's the original spiritual master, because it's from Balaram that knowledge of Krishna, knowledge of the true purpose of life, and knowledge of how to attain it is received. Rajendra Nandana Jay Sachisuta Hoilo Se Balarama Hoilo Nitai. In this age of Kali Yuga, Krishna, the son of Nanda, becomes the son of Sachi, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Balaram is Nityananda Prabhu. What do we know about Lord Chaitanya? Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, explains that everything he's writing, it is all by the direction and the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu. Vrindavan Das Thakur of the Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, he was a direct disciple of Nityananda Prabhu. So everything we know about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is coming from Nityananda Prabhu. And similarly, whatever we know and whatever power we have to follow about Krishna is coming from Balaram. As Shesha, as Ananta, he performed certain sevas. At the time of Lord Ramchandra, he appeared as Lakshman, the younger brother of Ram. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita describes that as the younger brother, he had to accept whatever the order and resolve of Ram was. Because as Guru, he's setting an example. He's the original Guru, Lakshman. He's setting an example of how to follow Ram. As younger brother, if Ram tells Lakshman, I marry Sita, now I want her to start performing many of the services that you used to do. He has to accept. Ram's out fighting against Kara and Dushan. Lakshman wants to fight. Ram says, I'm putting Sita in a cave, you just stand in front of the cave and guard her. Just standing there. That mystic, Rakshasa, Maricha, he appeared as a golden deer. Lakshman said, this is a mystic demon. This is not a deer. There's no deer in your creation like this. After all, he's the creator. He knows. Sita said, no, I want the deer. I want the deer. So Ram said, oh, I have to get the deer. Sita wanted him to be a pet and play with and give pleasure to. And when the Rakshasa cried out, Ram, save me, Sita said, you must go. And Lakshman said, that's the Rakshasa, that's not Ram. She said, no, you must go. I know why you're not going. You were just waiting. You came to the forest just so that you can be with me when Ram wasn't here. So that you could enjoy me. Lakshman was... His devotion to Ram, for 14 years, he didn't sleep a single night, 24 hours a day. He was on guard. Every service he would build, wherever they would go, he would build a little house for Ram out of whatever materials were there, and he'd sit in front as Sita and Ram would rest. So Sita said, go. He had to go. And after that big war in Lanka, he had to make a pyre of fire for Sita to walk into. And later on, Ram told Lakshman, bring Sita and leave her at the ashram of Valmiki Muni. I don't want to go too much into that story because it's too sweet, if you understand it properly. He was surrendering. But he made a resolve. From now on, whenever I come into your Leela, I will be your older brother. Then he could exercise the etiquette. And in Krishna Leela he did. Krishna was very fond of Yudhisthira and the Pandavas, and so was Balaram. But Balaram was fond of Duryodhana too. And as Radha Gopinath Prabhu was describing in his wonderful class this morning, Balaram had different ideas initially about Arjuna marrying Subhadra. So they had differences. But it was always with pure love, as in Vatsalya Rasa and protective mode of devotion. And Nityananda Prabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said to Nityananda, do not come back to Puri next year, stay in Bengal. And the next year, Nityananda came back to Puri. Because Balaram knows the essence of the heart of Krishna. And Nityananda Prabhu knows the essence of the heart of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And they are in perfect harmony, but a different Leela. So Balaram and Krishna are born about 8 days apart. And Garga Muni came to perform their name-giving ceremony in secret. Vasudev sent him. They did it in a cowshed. And Garga Muni gave, his name will be Baladev because he loves to exhibit his great strength. And Ram because he will give the sweetest pleasure to all the inhabitants of Gokul. And his name is Shankarshan because he is uniting the family of Vasudeva and the following families of Nanda Maharaj. When Krishna and Balaram were little children, they would crawl. After a while, Putana king, Shakatasura, Trinavarta, and Shukadev Goswami describes how Krishna and Balaram, they would crawl in the mud of Braj Bhumi. And the mud was very special. Sometimes it was quite wet because of the dung and the urine of the cows. And they would just, as they were learning how to crawl, they were like little snakes. They would just slither around, and they had ankle bells that would tinkle so sweetly. It's described that the gopis would see them clothed in the mud, the dung, and the urine of the cows and the ground of Braj Bhumi. And sometimes they would see a little calf and grab the tail of the calf, and the calf would get scared because someone's pulling their tail, and they'd start running. And then Krishna and Balaram, they'd get scared that they were getting pulled, so they were afraid to let go. They were being dragged by the calves through the muddy grounds of Braj Bhumi, and all the gopis would laugh and take great pleasure. Rohini would pick up Balaram, Yashoda would pick up Krishna. When they were about to feed them the milk from their own bodies to nourish them, they would look in the mouth and see little teeth starting to grow. And Rohini would count how many little teeth were starting to grow in Balaram's mouth, and they would make comparisons with Yashoda Mai and Krishna's mouth. In this way, motherly affection. And Rohini Devi and Yashoda Mai, they were always in anxiety, worried, because they were so mischievous, crawling everywhere, very active. And there were the giant horns of bulls and cows. And there was monkeys with sharp teeth and claws. And there were dogs and cats. Sometimes there's thorns on the ground. Sometimes people would leave weapons like swords on the ground. Shukadev Goswami tells that Rohini and Yashoda were constantly in a state of the transcendental ecstasy known as the distress of affection. Because it is not mundane. Krishna and Balaram were performing these leelas simply for the purpose of increasing the love of the mothers, the Brijabasis, and equally so to increase the love of each and every one of us if we learn to hear about these wonderful pastimes with faith. After a while, they learned how to walk. They would fall down every now and then, and they'd hold on to something, and Nanda Maharaj would give his finger for them to hold on to, and they'd walk, and then Nanda Maharaj would just lift his finger, and they'd fall, and they'd get up again. And in this way, Krishna says in Gita, I'm the ability in man, I'm the intelligence of the intelligent. But just to attract our love, he's learning to walk. This is the intimacy that is exclusively revealed in Sri Vrindavan Dham. After they learn how to walk, immediately they begin their pastimes of stealing butter. Krishna Balaram. The gopis would complain to Yashoda and Rohini, and so many wonderful leelas were there. They moved to Vrindavan from Gokul. There Krishna liberated in the presence of Balaram, Vatsasura, Bakasura. Balaram's birthday, a little later, there was Agasura, the Brahma Vimohan Leela that took place today. And soon after they entered into their Poganda stage. Means from the age 6 to 10. And on the 8th moon of the waxing, 8th day of the waxing moon of the month of Kartik, the day of Gopastami, Krishna and Balaram were given charge of the cows. And one day when they were in the pastures, Shukadev Goswami tells, Krishna was giving so much loving honor and glory to his elder brother Balaram. He said, just see how all the trees of Vrindavan have so many ripe fruits. They're all bowing down just to honor your lotus feet and your presence here. And the bees are great sages who are all following you wherever you go and in great ecstasy, chanting your glories. And peacocks all around, see the peacocks, how they are dancing just for your pleasure, Sri Balaram. And the does, the female deer, they're offering their love and their respect to you by glancing upon you with so much feeling. The cuckoos and the birds, they are singing for your pleasure, Balaram. And the earth is considering herself supremely fortunate to be blessed with your footprints. And the mountains, the trees, they are feeling so blessed because you touch them with the tips of your fingers. And most of all, the gopis, they have achieved the ultimate happiness and fortune because you embrace them with your arms. Sometimes when they'd play, and Balaram would be tired, he would lay his head in the lap of a cowherd boy, and Krishna would personally massage Balaram's lotus feet with great care. And other times, Krishna would get tired, and he would lay in the lap of one of his cowherd boys, and Balaram would massage his lotus feet. One day, as these beautiful pastimes of love were taking place, some of the cowherd boys, headed by Sridama, Subala, Stoka Krishna, they spoke. O Rama, Balarama, who have very strong arms, and O Krishna, who is the vanquisher of all enemies. Just close by, there is a forest of the name Talaban. In that forest, there are many, many trees, tall trees. And there are limitless fruits, fragrant, luscious fruits. They're growing. They're covering the trees. They're falling to the ground. The ground is such fresh, green, luxurious grass. And these fruits, we could smell them now, but nobody can eat them. Because there is a powerful mystic yogi who has taken the form of an ass. His name, Dhenuka. He's so cruel. Along with his associates who have also assumed the form of gigantic asses. They will not allow anyone to come to touch those fruits. Even a bird cannot enter Talavan without being killed. They are so wicked, so cruel, and so strong. They are the associates of Kamsa. Any human being that comes into Talavan, they will eat them alive. Such terrorism. But why should all those fruits go to waste? We want to see you perform your wonderful transcendental pastimes. The cowherd boys didn't really want the fruits themselves, but they know how Krishna loves his devotees. So they said, we want to eat these fruits. Please get them for us. Now, Krishna Balaram hear about the atrocious, incredible power of these demons. And they laughed and joked and said, yes, let us go to Talavan. And with joking words and singing songs, they entered Talavan. And Balaram went in first and went up to the trees to shake them with such force that the fruits were falling to the ground. For Dhenukasura, this was a serious trespass. Janasya moho yamaham mameti. The basis of material illusion is I and mine. So he is thinking, I am Dhenuka. There is no power greater than mine. And this forest is mine. Who has the right to touch my trees and make my fruits fall from the trees? And the asses wouldn't even eat the fruits themselves. But they wouldn't let anyone else eat them either. It's just the way they found the happiness of power. So Dhenukasura, he wasn't like the donkeys we see here in India. He was gigantic. He was a monster. When he galloped, the entire earth shook. The planet shook. He charged at Balaram. He was so... At least I could do something. So, charged at Balaram. His eyes were red like coals. So angry and so disrespectful. Balaram's the supreme personality of Godhead. He's all beautiful. He's the proprietor of everything that exists. And Dhenukasura turned his back to Balaram. And with his hind legs, he kicked Balaram in the chest with all his might. Now, it's impossible for any living being to withstand that. But Balaram just stood there, completely unaffected. More than anything he could say, that was a total insult to Dhenukasura. He was so outraged. He started running, not running, galloping in circles in rage, screaming. I'm not going to do it again. Because you're laughing. This is serious. And again he turned to Balaram, kicking him with even more force. Balaram effortlessly, with one hand, he caught hold of Dhenukasura's hind leg and twirled him above his head. Just kept twirling him and twirling him and twirling him faster and faster and faster and faster until Dhenukasura was so dizzy that he died. And now Balaram is twirling around over his head this dead, gigantic demon ass. And then he threw him to the top of the biggest of all the tall trees. And those tall trees were gigantic. And the weight of Dhenukasura was so much. The tree leaned, and broke. And crashed into another tree, and that tree broke. And so many trees were breaking. Dhenukasura's friends, they were so obsessed with ego, so obsessed with anger, so obsessed with envy. Why couldn't they see that Balaram effortlessly, with a smile on his face, practically with one hand, just twirled him around and threw him away? But they were covered over. That's what envy does. That's what arrogance does. We can't see the reality. People may be so big and so powerful. Can't they see that death is right in front of them? Can't they see the dangers of this world? Can't they see the vulnerabilities and the shortcomings of themselves? Well, that's how thoroughly Maya can cover over a person. So all these gigantic asses attacked Balaram and Krishna. They actually first came to Krishna. And Krishna grabbed with one hand, and Balaram stepped next to Krishna, and both of them, one at a time, Krishna and Balaram, and the cowherd boys were enjoying this so much. Could you imagine seeing this personal, live in action? Through sound vibration, we're seeing it right now. Krishna and Balaram, and soon all the trees were covered with asses. Asura asses. Asuras. So, but it was beautiful. Because these gigantic, they were like mountains. They had dark bodies. And now there was blood covering their bodies. Usually blood and dead bodies are really disgusting or grotesque. But because Krishna did it, it was beautiful. It was so aesthetically pleasing to the heart. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya jutuskritam. When Krishna wants to do, he can do it in such a way that it's an artistic masterpiece that melts the heart with sweetness. You know, painters may paint a beautiful lady or a beautiful man or a wonderful landscape when the sun is rising, but nothing could compare to the beautiful artistic sweetness of sing Talavan at that time. That is Krishna. That is Balaram. And just then, the Devas were so mesmerized by this pastime. They showered rains of flowers, fragrant flowers upon Balaram and Krishna. And they sang beautiful songs and offered prayers. And after that, so many people got to come to Talavan to eat the fruits. But the cowherd boys, they wouldn't eat it because they thought they're contaminated by the blood of these asuras. They never wanted them in the first place. They just induced Krishna and Balaram to perform this wonderful lila for the well-being of all the world. Thakur Bhakti Vinod explains that these different asuras that were liberated by Krishna and Balaram and Vrindavan represent particular obstacles on the path of pure devotional service. And Dhenukasura especially represents gross material intelligence, ignorance of one's spiritual knowledge. Like sometimes we see abused donkeys or asses, they have to carry big loads. So by the power of Maya and by the influence of bad association, we also become like that. Sometimes the big load is knowledge or whatever we may acquire. Queen Kunti prays that too much knowledge, too much wealth, too much fame, too much beauty, too much prestige, they can all be disqualifications for devotional service because they could make us arrogant. So some of us, we collect so much, but at the same time, all those things could be great assets and blessings if we use them in harmony with our true self. This simple principle, Jivera Swarupoi Krishnera Nityadas, the basis of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings, the basis of all the knowledge of the Vedas. We're all eternal servants of the Lord. Whatever knowledge we have, whatever wealth we have, whatever abilities we have, whatever influence over others we have, we should use it to uplift society para upakar. Help people physically, emotionally, but especially spiritually. Nothing pleases Krishna more than sharing his message, sharing his grace with others, in whatever way we have the capacity to do so. Otherwise, if we're doing it for our own selfish purposes, then it's that inclination of Dhenuka, misplaced knowledge, accumulating but not utilizing properly. So by the grace of Balaram, by the grace of Balaram's representative, our spiritual masters, our gurus, our Diksha gurus, our Shiksha gurus, we actually learn how to have the determination to live in a spirit of seva, devotional service. And then we could slay this propensity within us represented by Dhenuka and his associates. After this lila of Dhenukasura, Krishna and Balaram, along with the cowherd boys, they came back to the village of Braj. And Shukadev Goswami gives a beautiful description. They had a wonderful day, and they're coming back. Krishna's beautiful hair, just curling around his moon-like face, is covered with the dust that was raised by the hooves of the cows. It's decorated with peacock feathers and the wild flowers of the forest of Vrindavan. And he's glancing in a very charming way, and he's smiling beautifully while he's playing upon his flute. And the Gopas, they're singing the glories of what Krishna and Balaram had done that day. In this way, they enter Vrindavan. And the young Gopis, they're drinking the nectar of Krishna in this beautiful forms with their eyes. Their eyes are like honeybees, eagerly drinking the honey from the lotus, beautiful darshan of Shri Krishna, Balaram. And Krishna reciprocates with the gopis by accepting their loving glances. And heart to heart, the exchange of the sweetest, most intimate love takes place. Yashoda Mai and Rohini Devi, they bring Krishna into their arms, embrace them. As they're embracing their children, who are now about 6 years old, they're simultaneously embracing them in motherly affection and checking out every one of their limbs to see if there's any injuries or any problems. Then they bathe their children, put fragrant natural oils on their body, dress them with beautiful garments, feed them all the foods that they like the best. Rohini and Yashoda would fulfill all of Krishna and Balaram's desires, but they did it with discipline. They fed Krishna and Balaram just what they liked and what was best for them at just the right times. And singing their glories with tears of love in their eyes, motherly affection, they would put Krishna and Balaram to sleep for the night. Summer was coming, Shukadev Goswami tells. But summer in Vrindavan was just like spring. You know how summer could be. It gets dry, it gets hot. But by Balaram's mercy in Sri Braj Bhumi, everything was so pleasing. Even though it was summer, the waterfalls, the breezes, the lakes, the lotus flowers, the fragrances of jasmine, everything was so refreshing and cool. And Krishna and Balaram, with their friends, would play. Every type of game that there ever was, they would play. They would play with amalaki fruits. They'd throw them and catch them. They would put blindfold on a boy, and then the boy had to guess who was behind them. They would imitate monkeys. They would jump like frogs. They would sing like birds. They would dance like peacocks. One day, Kamsa sent the worst of the demons. His name was Pralamba. Pralamba, so deceiving. At least Dhenoka, you know who he is. He was vicious and cruel and hateful, but he was honest in the sense that, this is who I am. But Pralamba, he was even more cruel and powerful and vicious than Dhenoka, but he disguised himself by assuming, by his mystic powers, the form of a cowherd boy, Gopa. And he was so thorough in his research. He understood that on that day, a particular cowherd boy, a real cowherd boy, wasn't able to come. He was held back by his parents that day. So he seized the opportunity and he took a replica form just like that Gopa. He talked like him, he laughed like him, he looked like him, he dressed like him. And he was so sweet and playful looking, but his intention were to murder Balaram and Krishna. And Krishna knows everything. He understood exactly what was going on. But Krishna played the game. He'll play the game with us too if we want to deceive him. He'll let us play the game for a while. Krishna welcomed him. He said, "Oh, I'm so happy you have come today, and let us play." And then Krishna decided, he had his plan. He said, "Today we will play a game where we'll have two opposing sides. And individually, one boy on each side will oppose each other. And whoever wins, the loser has to carry him on his shoulder to proclaim to all the other cowherd boys, I have lost." So they played. Pralamba Gopa then, he took the side of Krishna. Because I guess he wanted to start with Balaram. And Krishna's side lost. Krishna was the leader of his team, Balaram was the leader of the opposing team. So Sri Rama, who was on Balaram's side, Krishna carried him on his shoulders and was dancing around Vrindavan. Bhadrasena, he carried Vrishabha on his shoulders. And Pralamba carried Balaram. This was taking place in a particular area of Vrindavan on the bank of the Yamuna, the forest of Bandiravan. There's a banyan tree there. The Puranas described in the time of Krishna, it was a gigantic banyan tree. It was such a big banyan tree that there was a branch that crossed over the whole Yamuna River, and it was like a bridge. They could just play and herd their cows and everything on the branch there to cross over the Yamuna River to the other side. That side of the Yamuna, the presiding deity is Balaram. So Pralamba, this sweet-looking, innocent cowherd boy, took Balaram on his shoulders and started to run. Now, most of them were just running in the area, but Pralamba took Balaram farther and farther and farther away. And Balaram is thinking, where is this cowherd boy taking me? Balaramji, he's the source of Karunodakshayi Vishnu. He's the source of Ananta Shesha, who carries the planets like mustard seeds on top of his head. But here he is, a little cowherd boy with a beautiful white complexion and lotus-like eyes, and the supreme object of all beauty, Sri Balaramji. He gets heavy. He assumes the heaviness of a mountain. Now, little Pralamba couldn't deal with that. So in order to resist the weight of Balaram, he manifested his original form. From this little gopa, he grew so huge, he was reaching the clouds. He was like a massive mountain with eyes that were radiantly red with anger. And because he was like a king, he had beautiful crown and jewels on. He looked like a huge cloud and holding the full moon, Balaram. And his gold jewelry were like lightning. So he was roaring. And when Balaram saw little Pralamba become this, big Pralamba, from Pralamba Gopi to Pralamba Sura, Balaram was thinking, my friend has changed in every way. And Balaramji, with his little fist, hit him once on the head. And Pralamba's head cracked open, and he roared, and when he fell to the ground, the entire earth shook. And all the gopas ran to that site, and when they saw what happened, they congratulated Balaram and embraced him. The demigod showered flowers, and there was music. Krishna was so proud of Balaram. Balaram is always so proud of Krishna. Pralambasura represents the inclination to satisfy our lusty desires. And the deep inclination in our heart for name, for fame, for prestige. They are like Pralamba. How are they like Pralamba? Because they're so deceiving. Pralamba took the guise of a little gopa who was a friend. So similarly, these desires within our hearts, they may appear to us in such a way that they'll make us happy, that they're our friends, but they steal us away from Krishna. So by the mercy of Balaram, we can be aware of these things. Balaram manifests through our spiritual masters to make us aware and to have determination. Vyavashayatmaka buddhir ekeha kudunandana. Krishna tells those who are on this path must be resolute in purpose. We must have determination. We can take shelter of Krishna, but God helps those who help themselves. Krishna is not going to help us unless we give everything we can to try to do it, to do what we can to please him, to serve him. We have our 4 regulative principles. We have our vow for chanting the holy names. There are many different Trinadapi Sunichena. It's important that with great determination, with resolute purpose, we try to follow the path. And if we do that, under the guidance of Balaram's representatives, and we chant the holy names, then Krishna will reciprocate. Srila Prabhupada especially he inspired us to pray to Lord Balaram for spiritual strength. We pray to Balaram for spiritual strength because he's the source of all spiritual strength. What is that Bala? Balaram gives the power of the soul. We are all infinite part and parcels of Balaram and Krishna. Within this body, however strong we may be, whether we're an elephant or whether we're an ant, we can't do anything unless the living force, the soul, is there. The soul is the source of all strength. And that soul, the strength, is part and parcel of Balaram's supreme strength. So we pray for that spiritual strength. When Prabhupada was asked, what if I don't have determination? Prabhupada said, you do have determination. You just have to use it. You have to use your free will to cultivate and develop your determination, your enthusiasm. That is tapasya. To act with resolve, with enthusiasm, with determination, to do what's right, to do Krishna's will, coming through our spiritual masters. But with humility of taking shelter. And when Krishna sees we're really trying our best and we're humbling ourselves, praying for his grace, his mercy, and Krishna tells he will preserve what we have and carry what we lack. The example is given that the material ocean, to cross it is like trying to swim across a limitless ocean. But if we sincerely, with determination, with enthusiasm, and with faith, try our best, under proper guidance, and chant the holy names, and sincerely hear the glories of the Lord and Krishna, he will make that ocean the amount of water and the hoofprint of a little calf. And we can overcome the pralambasura tendencies within our hearts. In Vrindavan, the years passed. One full moon night was actually the night of Holi. Krishna and Balaram were near Govardhan Hill with their gopis. They were singing. And Shankachuda, he was connected to Kuvera, the treasure of the Devatas. And when you have sometimes if we have a friend who's in a high place, we think, just see how great I am. Can you imagine Kuvera? And he had an incredible jewel, unbelievably precious jewel he kept on his head, and it made him really beautiful. So Prabhupada explains that when you have such power and such knowledge and such high connections and such beauty and such wealth, the tendency is you think everything's for you to enjoy. So he saw the beauty of the gopis and he heard the wonderful singing of Krishna and Balaram. Krishna and Balaram, when they wanted to please their gopis, they had different groups of gopis for each of them. They could sing all the ragas and all the notes and all the scales at the same time, each one of them. Can any of you sing more than one note at a time? We could have 10 people harmonizing in different ways. But only each one of us could only sing one note at a time. But Krishna or Balaram, they could sing every note simultaneously, beautifully. And they were singing with so much feeling, so much emotion, and so much love just to please their devotees. And their devotees were really pleased. And Shankachuta came and literally with a stick, he stole the gopis away. He was thinking, they are mine. I'm running out of time. Because there's an eclipse tonight, so I'm supposed to end on time. The gopis were calling out, Krishna, Balaram, save us. And Balaram took care of the gopis, and Krishna went out to get Shankachuta. And Shankachuta, when he saw Krishna running after him, he ran away. And the gopis were entrusted with Balaram. Krishna caught Shankachuta and liberated him. And then took the jewel. And in front of all gopis, he presented it with great love and respect to Lord Balaramji. Akrura later took Krishna and Balaram to Mathura, where Krishna wrestled Janura and Balaram wrestled Mustika. Then Kamsa was liberated. Then Vasudeva and Devaki, they were so pleased to have Krishna and Balaram back after 10.5 years of separation. Please stay with us. They went to the ashram of Sandipani Muni. And there, Krishna and Balaram learned so many wonderful subjects and gave dakshina for the pleasure of their guru. I'll end with one beautiful story. It is a story that Vrindavan Das Thakur begins Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita telling. The glory of Nityananda Balaram. After many years of living in Mathura, they later, Krishna Balaram, shifted to Dwarka. Balaram was feeling great love for the Brijvasis in Vrindavan, remembering their friendship and their love. He wanted to return. After so many years of being away, and he also understood how deeply the Brijvasis were in separation from Krishna. He desired to console them. Balaramji took the permission of Krishna. Krishna wanted to go with him. But the leaders of the Yadu dynasty, they knew that compared to the residents of Vrindavan, they had hardly any love at all. Especially the gopis. If Krishna goes back to Vrindavan, the love of the gopas, the love of the gopis will be so great, they will never allow him to come back to Dwarka, and he will have no power to come back. So they prevented Krishna from going. So Balaram, with Krishna's blessings and his message, he went to Vrindavan. And there he met Nanda and Yashoda. They cried. After so many years, they put Balaram on their laps and they embraced him, inquired about all the different matters that were happening in Dwarka. We heard that Kamsa was finally killed. That's such good news. And how is Vasudeva? And how is Devaki? And how is everyone else? And how is Krishna? Does he ever remember us? Balaram was embracing his friends. He was touching the feet of his superiors. He was giving blessings to his juniors. And then he met the gopis. And he saw the gopis' deep separation from Krishna. They were thinking about him in the fire of separation 24 hours a day, living just for the moment that Krishna would return. But every day would pass without Krishna. Within their hearts, Krishna was living constantly, reciprocating love with them in separation. When Balaram saw how they were immersed in this limitless ocean of feelings of loving separation, he meditated on Krishna. And in his remembrance of Krishna, he became completely infused with Krishna's presence. He spoke Krishna's loving message to them. He spoke Krishna's wonderful pastimes to them. And they completely felt the presence of Krishna in Balaram. And then with his own set of gopis, many of them who were when Krishna was in Vrindavan, they were very young. Balaram had his own group of gopis. He went to a place quite far from where Krishna had his Ras Leela. Upstream in the Yamuna, there is a place today, Sri Ram Ghat. And there, every night for 2 months, Balaramji would perform Ras Leela with gopis. Shukadev Goswami tells story how Varuna sent his daughter Varuni in the form of a most pure, natural, intoxicating beverage. But not intoxicating like Mumbai intoxications, which put you in the mode of ignorance. This puts you in a transcendental state. You can't imitate. Puts you in a transcendental state of intoxicated love. So the fragrance of this Varuni beverage was drifting through the atmosphere. It attracted Balaram and the gopis to come. They were wandering through the forest and they found in the hollow of a tree pot of Varuni. They drank. And they were singing wonderful songs and dancing and wandering through the forest together. And Balaram decided that he wanted to have pastimes in the Yamuna. So he called Yamuna Devi to come. Yamuna Devi was thinking, Balaram is intoxicated. So she didn't really take it seriously. So Balaram, in his loving, sweet mood of being the supreme power of all spiritual powers, he said, Yamuna, you wretched river, you think you have a right to defy my order? With my plow, I will scratch you into many different little streams. As soon as he said that and began doing it, an expansion of Kalindi, Krishna's wife in Dwarka, who was connected with the tattva of Yamuna, she appeared with folded hands and begged forgiveness. I didn't understand who you truly are, but now I completely surrender my heart in your service for your pleasure. And you're always kind to those who surrender to you. So please be kind to me. So Balaram was very happy, and he and his gopis performed beautiful pastimes in the Yamuna River. Wonderful lotus flowers. When they came out, the goddess of fortune, Kanti Devi, offered Balaram a lotus garland where each flower and each petal never faded, never lost its fragrance. And precious blue-colored garments and wonderful jewel. In this way, Balaram gave great happiness, great pleasure to all of the residents of Vrindavan for these 2 months. Then returned to Dwarka. Soon after, there was someone named Vivida. I'm going to go a little over time. Vivida was a gigantic, and he was so strong. He was best friends with Narakasura. And Krishna killed Narakasura. So he could not tolerate that. He had to get revenge. So he was just terrorizing all the places around. Not far from Dwarka, he would go to the sea, and with his arms, which were so strong, they were longer than huge Dwapar Yuga tal trees. He would swish around the water, and all the shores of the sea would flood over, create tsunamis. He would go to villages and burn them down. He would go to aristocratic families and just torture them and destroy them. He would go to the places that Brahmins were, and he would terrorize them. First he would torture them, sometimes kill them, and then where they were performing their ceremonies, he would pass enormous quantities of stool and urine all over it. He would abuse and contaminate young ladies in the grossest possible ways. It was horrible. And one day, he happened to hear Balaram with some of his lady friends in the Raivataka mountain. And they were all singing and dancing together. He came there. And when he saw Balaram singing and playing, he got on a tree and started making this very obnoxious sound. Srimad Bhagavatam says, kila kila. And they looked up at him, and he started moving his eyebrows and showing his teeth. So they kind of thought that was funny. The ladies were laughing. And then he went right up to them, just right in front of them, and turned around and showed his rear side and started passing massive quantities of stool and urine. It was really insulting. Balaram understood all the people he was abusing, all the ladies he was abusing, all the Brahmins he was killing, he knew everything. So he took a piece of stone, Balaram, and threw it at Vivida. It hit him on the head. And little blood came out. It says it was beautiful. Balaram, when he does things, everything's wonderful. It's like liquid manganese. Then Vivida started pulling the clothes of the ladies. And this was too much. Balaram picked up his club. And Vivida wanted to fight. Vivida he uprooted a gigantic tree. And with his mighty hands, he just immediately ripped off all the branches, and there was this trunk of a huge tree. With all of his strength, he smashed Balaram on the head. Balaram stood there, and then with his club, he destroyed the tree. Vivida uprooted another tree, did the same thing. And Balaram was making all the trees into little pieces with his club, until every tree in the forest, there was no more trees. There were mountains. He was lifting the rocks and throwing them at Balaram. And Balaram, with his club, he just hit the rock and made it into powder. Every rock from every mountain in the whole area, Balaram would make powder. Now Vivida was really angry. He put down, there was nothing left. With his gigantic, mighty fists, he ran to Balaram. He roared. All of his strength, he beat him. Boom, 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 boom. Balaram stood there. And then with one punch, Balaram hit him in the collarbone. And this massive, gigantic mountain of a gorilla, Vivida, he vomited. He passed stool. He passed urine. He fell to the ground, shook the earth, and was liberated. Now, why did I tell this story? First of all, because it's one of my favorite stories. And the message of it is really important. Because if you read Ramayana, we find Vivida was a devotee of Ram. He and his brother Minda were two of the most trusted soldiers in the Vanara army. They did so many heroic deeds fighting against Ravana and Kumbhakarna and Indrajit. They were commanders under Sugriva and Hanuman. They were devotees of Ram who fought for Ram. And in some of the prayers in the Vedas, we read about Ram in the spiritual world being worshipped by Minda and Vivida. Well, in the spiritual world, they're completely pure, transcendental personalities. They expanded themselves in Ram Leela. They were devotees and they did great service. But somehow or other, Vivida was disrespectful to Lakshman, Balaram. Somehow although he served Ram, he had envy and disrespect intention toward Lakshman. And because of that offense to the original guru, he was misled into the association of someone like Bhaumasura. And in that association, one thing leads to another. We disrespect our gurus. We disrespect great Vaishnavas. Somehow or other, we become attracted to to negative association. And in that unfavorable association, he became demoniac. He became very materialistic. And in this next incarnation of Lakshman, Balaram, he was full-fledged envious. But Balaramji liberated him by his great mercy. As time passed, Dantavakra was killed, and Vidurata. Those were the two last demons that Krishna killed. And it was around that time that Balaram heard that there was going to be a battle in Kurukshetra between the Pandavas and the Kurus. And Balaram, he was neutral. And being elder brother, he had his free will. He knew that Krishna was very, very much on the side of the Pandavas. In fact, he was going to be the chariot driver for Arjuna. But Balaram did not want to go against Krishna, and at the same time, he had such favorable relationships with the Kurus. So he decided to go on pilgrimage to some holy places to bathe in holy lakes and rivers. So he didn't have to participate. He went so many places. Great description is there in the Srimad Bhagavatam. He came to Naimisharanya. And there was great sages and rishis who were performing a ceremony for a long time. And the presiding priest was a direct disciple of Vyasadeva. His name Romaharshan. When Balaram came, all the sages and all the rishis and all the yogis and all the priests, they know he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All yajnas are ultimately meant for his satisfaction. So they greeted him. But Romaharshan did not show any respect at all. He could have bowed down. He could have stood up. Even if he just folded his hands together. Some gesture would have been enough. But he was so arrogant and so hypocritical. He didn't even give the slightest respect to Balaram. Balaram understood his heart because Balaram is the source of the Paramatma. He is the Paramatma in every heart. He understood his intentions. And it was this type of hypocrisy because he came to reestablish the true principles of religion. So Balaram, he approached Romaharshan. You are a disciple of the great Vyasadeva. And you have thoroughly studied and learned the Vedas, the histories, the Puranas. But even after knowing all of these things, it has not formed good character in you. You are arrogant. You are disrespectful. You have no character. Therefore, all your learning and all your prestige that you're getting from your learning, it's all like an actor just playing a role on stage. I have come to free the world from hypocrites like you. Then Balaram took a single blade of kusha grass and touched the tip to Romaharshan, and Romaharshan died. Haribol. the sages and the rishis, they were shocked. They said, Balaram, this is not what you're supposed to do. We're Brahmins, and we just gave a benediction to him that he would live a long life. And he's reciting all the scriptures for us. Whatever you do is perfect, and you shouldn't undo anything you do. Balaram said, I'll bring him back to life. They said, no, don't bring him back to life. But if you don't show a good example, then how will the world learn? So please, go on pilgrimage for 12 months. Bathe in the holy places. Balaram, he said, the Father lives through the Son. Bring his Son. The Son was Sutta. And Balaram blessed him to be the perfect guru for the sages of Naimisharanya. He spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam, Sutta Goswami. They gave him the chore of delivering another asura named Bilvala, the son of Ilvala, which Balaram did, and that was the last asura. And then he went on his pilgrimage for 12 months. And just during that time, he learned that Duryodhana and Bhima were fighting. The Kurukshetra war was just at its end. Almost everyone was finished. But the culmination was Bhima and Duryodhana. And they were fighting for many days, and neither one could defeat the other. So Balaram was a peacemaker. He had gone to Hastinapur previously at the marriage, at the time of Samba and Lakshmana. And somehow or other he created peace. So he came again for a peace mission. And he saw them fighting. Balaram, the original spiritual master of all creation, he said, you shouldn't fight like this because neither of you could win fairly. Because Bhima is much stronger, but Duryodhana is much more expert at technique. So you're balancing each other. You're going to fight forever. Fairly, neither of you could win. So just stop fighting. Balaram was like a mediator. Somehow or other come to terms with each other. But Duryodhana, he could only remember all the times he was offended by Bhima. And Bhima could only remember all the times he was offended by Duryodhana. And meanwhile, Yudhisthira and Krishna are standing there. And when Balaram came, they folded hands and they stood up and they welcomed him, but they did not say a word. Because they knew that Balaram really liked Duryodhana. He was a student. He liked Bhima too. He loved everyone. But somehow or other, Duryodhana and Bhima could not stop this fight. When Balaram saw, he just said, this is providence. There is a higher power of Krishna's will here. So he left to continue his pilgrimage. And of course, neither could win each other. But Krishna taught Bhima how to bend the rules in such a way so he could win. So Balaram surrendered from a distance. That same Balaram, the source of all spiritual power, compassion, devotion, appears as Lord Nityananda in this age of Kali. And Lord Nityananda Prabhu, Dinahina Yata Chilo Harinamud Harilo Tara Sakshi Jagai Madhai. Although all-powerful, he's going house to house in Navadvip, falling on his knees with folded hands and tears in his eyes, even to the most sinful people like Jagai and Madhai, who were actually worse than Pralamba and Denuka and Vivida, more hypocritical than Romaharshan. And he was crying, begging them, take the name of Krishna, accept the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, and be my life and soul. This is the mercy of Lord Nityananda. When we understand the power and the greatness and the tattva, the position of Balaram as the creator of the entire universes and the ultimate spiritual servitor of the Lord and all living beings in the spiritual world, he's taking the most humble role as Lord Nityananda Prabhu, going town to town, village to village, begging us to accept the gift of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the gift of Prema Bhakti, the gift of entering into the eternal Leela of Krishna. Just chant the names of the Lord and serve with devotion. It's the message of Nityananda Prabhu. Srila Prabhupada, our beloved Acharya, he understood it's only by the mercy of Lord Nityananda Prabhu that one can approach Radharani and Krishna in this world. Our Prayojana Acharya Raghunath Das Goswami, he approached Radharani and Krishna in the form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through the mercy of Lord Nityananda Prabhu. Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis were brought to Lord Chaitanya by Nityananda Prabhu, as was Haridas Thakur. Srila Prabhupada established the deities of Gaur-Nitai all over the world to shower the world with this causeless, infinite mercy of love and compassion in Nityananda Prabhu. On this day of Balaram's appearance, let us close our eyes and fold our hands for a moment and pray for the causeless mercy of Nityananda Prabhu, as he is manifesting through our gurus, through the Vaishnavas, through the Shastras, through the path of pure devotion. Thank you very much.